I don't know if it was the click of the glass door behind me or the sudden lack of her laughter in the background, but something shifted the moment I left. For 2 hours, I stood near the tall white candles at the far end of the rooftop, unnoticed, unwanted. And she was radiant, magnetic, animated in ways she hasn't been with me in months. Maybe years. I lost count. Her red dress caught the light like it was designed for that terrace. For those people. For that life. Not for me. I watched her toast with strangers, fingers casually grazing arms as she leaned in for jokes I couldn't hear. Not once did she look my way. Not once did her eyes even scan the crowd for me. I had rehearsed things to say on the drive there. Lines. Silly ones like, nice crowd. Is everyone here required to have a podcast? Something to make her laugh. But I never got the chance. She floated. I hovered. She belonged. I observed. The waiter offered to refill my drink 3 times. I said no, even though my glass was nearly empty. I didn't want to be tipsy if I had to pretend everything was fine. At 9:47 p.m., I made the decision. I watched her lean in too close to her boss, again, and laugh like he'd invented humor. Her hand rested on his chest for a second too long. She whispered something, and he touched her wrist. I left. No scene. No jacket. Just my phone and my thoughts, which were already clawing at me like rats in a sack. I walked down the 11 floors instead of taking the elevator. Every step echoed louder than it should have. And when I hit the lobby and pushed open the last door, I heard a sound behind me, like the wind stopped for half a second. Then came the message. 5 minutes later. Where'd you go? That was all. No emoji. No punctuation. No apology. Just a text that arrived 5 minutes too late. And I hadn't even told her yet what I saw right before I left. I didn't respond. Not right away. I sat on the curb outside the venue, the kind with carefully placed plants and valet-only parking signs, watching a couple argue quietly under the orange streetlight. I kept thinking, what would she have done if I hadn't left? Would she have finally glanced in my direction? Or kept laughing into her boss's shoulder while pretending I was just part of the staff? My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time it read, Babe. She hadn't called me that in weeks. Months maybe. Not unless she wanted something. Usually when she needed help carrying groceries or when her mom was in town and I had to play perfect son-in-law. But tonight? No. That word felt foreign coming from her fingers. I scrolled up and stared at her previous text from earlier that day. Cheerful. Almost too cheerful. She'd sent me a mirror selfie of her makeup, asking which earrings looked more executive. I told her the small gold ones. She went with the pearls. I should have taken that as a sign. But it was what happened just before I walked out that keeps playing on loop in my head. See, I didn't leave immediately when I saw them laughing. I told you that already. But what I didn't mention was what I caught when I started heading toward the elevator, when I passed that back hallway near the restrooms. It was dim, and no one else was back there. Just the two of them. Her and her boss. His hand was on her waist. And not the casual kind. It was low. Familiar. Like it had been there before. I stopped walking. I don't even think I was breathing. She wasn't laughing anymore. She was looking up at him like he'd just told her a secret. Then she nodded. That nod destroyed me. It was small. Barely a movement. But it said everything I wasn't supposed to hear. So I turned around quietly, heart punching my ribs, and exited without a word. Now, sitting there on the sidewalk, I finally typed back. I saw you. I left it at that. No explanation. No drama. Just those 3 words. She read it instantly. No reply. The typing dots appeared, then vanished. Reappeared. Then nothing. I sat there for another 20 minutes, but she never texted again. And that silence, it said even more than the nod. I waited until midnight before going home. Not because I didn't know what to do. I knew exactly what I should do, but because I was scared of hearing her voice. Scared it would sound too normal. Or worse, like nothing had happened. I kept imagining she'd walk in and say something like, "Oh, that? You misunderstood," with that airy little laugh she uses when I'm being too dramatic. And the sad part is, I probably would have believed her. When I finally unlocked the apartment door, the lights were still off. No sign she had come back yet. I stood there in the entryway for a full minute, the quiet buzzing in my ears louder than anything else. Our place still smelled like the vanilla candle she always lights when guests are over, like she'd tried to create warmth earlier, before deciding I wasn't worth a second glance. I sat on the couch, didn't turn on the lights, didn't take off my shoes. I just stared at the hallway where she'd eventually walk in, rehearsing conversations I'd never have the nerve to start. She came home at 12:42 a.m. I know because I watched the numbers change on the microwave clock like they were keeping score. The door opened quietly. Too quietly. Like she thought I might be asleep. I heard her heels come off. She always kicks them off at the door like she's shedding a costume. Then the soft rustle of her dress as she passed the hallway. She didn't say my name. She walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and ran the faucet for a long time. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart was pounding like I was hiding from a stranger in my own home. When she finally walked into the living room, her eyes widened just slightly, like she wasn't expecting me to still be there. Like I wasn't supposed to see her come home this late. "Erwin," she said, voice too light. "You scared me." I didn't respond. I just looked at her. Really looked. The makeup had faded, the lipstick was mostly gone, and her hair was no longer perfect. She looked real, but not familiar. She opened her mouth to speak again, but nothing came out. Just silence, hanging heavy in the air between us. So I asked the only question that had been burning inside me since the moment I left that party. "What did he whisper to you?" Her face froze. A full beat passed. "Two." Then she laughed. "Owen, come on. You're being ridiculous." There it was. The deflection. The laugh. The dismissal of my gut feeling like it was a joke. I stood up. "Don't do that. Not this time." She blinked at me, unsure of how to react. Then she said it. The worst possible sentence she could have chosen in that moment. It wasn't what it looked like. I swear, if she had said literally anything else, if she had screamed, admitted it, begged, even lied better, I might have broken down right then and there. But that sentence, that tired, predictable, useless line, I nodded slowly. That's all I needed to hear. And I walked past her, straight to the bedroom, where the real story, the one I had no intention of sharing just yet, was waiting on my phone. Because the truth is, I hadn't just seen them together. I had video. The thing is, I didn't even mean to record it. It started as muscle memory. See, I've always had this habit of flipping on my phone's camera when I feel uncomfortable in public, like it gives me something to focus on. Like I'm documenting the moment just in case something awful happens, or maybe, to prove to myself later that it wasn't all in my head. So when I turned the corner that night and saw them standing close, too close, in that narrow hallway behind the main bar, my thumb was already sliding across the lock screen. I didn't even lift the phone. I just let the camera run by my side as I stared through them like a ghost. I was shaking, not because of rage, not even because of heartbreak. I was shaking because part of me already knew. She wasn't kissing him. Not exactly. But the intimacy was undeniable. Her head tilted as he leaned in, lips almost brushing her cheek, and her eyes fluttered shut. She didn't pull away. She didn't even flinch. It was like they'd done this before. Like this was just part of their rhythm. A quiet, stolen corner between champagne flutes and fake congratulations. And then the whisper came. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear it. The music was too loud, but her reaction was instant. Her hand gripped his lapel. She smiled. Not the big showy smile she gives to clients or her Instagram stories. No, this one was softer. Secretive. Dangerous. That's when she nodded. I stopped recording as I backed away. My legs felt like sand. I didn't know if I was going to collapse or throw up or scream. I ended up doing none of those things. I walked straight out of that place like a man stepping out of his own body. And now, 2 hours later, that video sat in my phone gallery like a lit match in a pile of dry leaves. She was in the kitchen when I emerged from the bedroom, making tea, like it was any other night, like we hadn't just crossed some invisible threshold into a version of our life where nothing could be trusted. "Want some?" she asked, without turning around. I sat at the counter and watched her pour water over the chamomile bag. "You still haven't answered my question," I said quietly. She didn't look up. "I told you already. You misinterpreted it." I slid my phone across the counter. "Then interpret this for me." Her hand stopped midair. She looked at the phone like it might explode. For a second, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she picked it up and pressed play. The sound was muted, but the image was crystal clear. Her, him, the lean, the smile, the whisper, the nod. When it ended, she put the phone down and finally looked me in the eye. And in that moment, I saw something flicker in her face. Not guilt, not fear, resentment. "Erwin," she said flatly, "I can't believe you were recording me." That's when I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until that second. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even surprised. She was angry that she got caught. And that's when everything in me, every last piece of trust I'd been patching together with excuses and wishful thinking, finally snapped. But I still hadn't told her the worst part. That her betrayal didn't just end at the whisper. It went way, way deeper than she thought I knew. After she accused me of spying on her, spying, as if I were some intruder in my own marriage, I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even raise my voice. That's not who I am. I just stood there, breathing through my nose, tasting something bitter I couldn't swallow. She didn't explain the video. Didn't try. Instead, she retreated. Said she was tired, that we'd talk tomorrow, and walked off into the bedroom like she hadn't just shattered me with her silence. She left her tea on the counter, untouched, cooling, just like everything else between us. I sat there alone for another hour, staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering when exactly I stopped being someone she could tell the truth to. Was it weeks ago? Months? Had this started before the promotion? Before the late nights? Or had it always been there, hiding under the surface while I kept pretending we were fine? I picked up my phone again, not even sure why. I wasn't ready to look at the hallway clip again. Once was enough. I didn't need to torture myself. But I scrolled back, just to remind myself it was real, that I wasn't insane. And that's when I saw it. Another clip. Shorter. Only 13 seconds. But timestamped 10 minutes after the first. I didn't remember recording anything else. In fact, I was certain I hadn't. But there it was, same outfit, same party, same camera angle. The phone must have kept recording accidentally while I walked. My hand must have bumped it. The footage was shaky, angled low, filming mostly floor and movement, until it didn't. At the 7-second mark, the camera stopped moving. The phone must have been swinging at my side, forgotten. But it caught something. Someone. It caught Selena. Again. But this time, she wasn't with her boss. She was standing in the far corner of the rooftop, facing someone I couldn't immediately identify. He wore a charcoal jacket, tall, dark hair, couldn't have been more than 30. They weren't laughing. They weren't even smiling. They were close, too close, and she had her arms crossed like she was angry, but her foot kept bouncing nervously. Then she did something that made me feel physically ill. She reached into her purse, pulled something out, and handed it to him. He looked around, then took it quickly and slipped it into his pocket. The clip ended there. No context, no sound, just 13 seconds of quiet betrayal that screamed louder than any confrontation ever could. I sat there, replaying the moment over and over. What was it? What did she give him? A letter? A hotel key? A flash drive? My mind spiraled into 100 possibilities, each worse than the last. And the look on her face, it wasn't casual. It was calculated, precise, like she knew exactly what she was doing. And suddenly, the whisper didn't matter anymore, because the game was bigger than that. And I wasn't just the ignored husband anymore. I was a liability. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing. She slept like a stone, peaceful, like she hadn't just lit a match and dropped it into the middle of our life. I kept wondering what kind of person could do that, could come home after whatever that was, sip tea in silence, and fall asleep knowing her husband had video proof of betrayal on his phone. By morning, I'd convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Some version of events that didn't end with me losing everything. Maybe the man in the second video was someone from work. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was unraveling because I wanted to believe it meant something. She woke up like nothing had happened, rolled over, kissed my shoulder, and asked if I wanted coffee. That threw me. Not because she'd never made coffee. She had. But because her tone was so normal, flat, like she was playing a part she'd rehearsed. Her performance was flawless, and suddenly I realized something terrifying. She thought I wouldn't do anything. She thought I was weak. And the worst part? She was almost right. I watched her move through the kitchen in her robe, like we were still just Selena and Erwin, the boring, stable couple from 4B who hosted game nights and laughed at grocery lists. She made small talk about the weather, then asked if I wanted to do something fun this weekend. That's when I interrupted her. What did you give him? She didn't flinch. Not even a pause. Just turned slowly, coffee mug in hand. Who? I didn't answer. I just stared. She sighed, leaned against the counter, and finally gave me a tired little smile, like I was the child in the room, not the man she married. Oh, that guy? Erwin, come on. He's a friend. It was a joke. We were just messing around. You passed him something. It was a mint. He asked for gum, and I didn't have any. That would have been funny if it hadn't been delivered with surgical precision. She'd come prepared with that line. She'd rehearsed it. The lie didn't even shake her voice. But there was something she hadn't planned for. The security footage. After I left the party, I'd received a weird text from the venue. One of those generic survey links they send to guests. I ignored it at first. But after watching that second video a few more times in the early hours of the morning, I remembered something. When we arrived at the building, they made us sign in. Names. Phone numbers. A waiver, even. For liability, they said. Which meant they had cameras. I emailed them pretending I lost a watch. Said I needed help checking the footage near the bar and bathrooms between 9 and 10 p.m. They responded within an hour. Helpful, polite. Said they'd send over anything relevant after review. I wasn't sure if they actually would, but I gave them my work email and waited. While I sat across from Selena at the kitchen table, pretending to eat a bowl of cereal I hadn't touched, the message came through. A zip file. For clips. Time-stamped. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the mouse. Everything okay? She asked. I smiled. Nodded. Yeah, just an email from work. She didn't know I was about to see exactly what happened after I left. And what I saw on those videos. It changed everything. Because after I walked out that night, thinking I was finally done being humiliated, she didn't go looking for me. She didn't even check her phone. She went straight back to him. But this time they kissed. I watched the footage in full screen, earbuds in, heart thudding so hard I could hear it over the video. There was no mistaking it. No ambiguity. This wasn't a hug or a joke or a misunderstood gesture. This was Selena turning the corner near the service bar, looking around, and waiting. Less than 30 seconds later, the man from the second video, the one with the charcoal jacket and slick back hair, walked up beside her. She didn't hesitate. She reached for his face, and he bent down like they'd done it 100 times before. It wasn't a quick kiss. It wasn't an accident. It was slow, familiar, confident. When they pulled apart, they looked around again. Then she laughed. Not her usual laugh, the fake one she uses for office parties and awkward neighbors. This was her real laugh, the one I hadn't heard in weeks. And she gave it to him. She touched his chest and said something I couldn't hear. Then they walked down the hallway toward the rear exit, the one we never used. The timestamp read 10:28 p.m. I left the party at 10:22. 6 minutes. That's all it took for her to move on from pretending I didn't exist to making sure someone else knew they were the center of her world. I didn't say anything right away. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and looked across the table at her. She was scrolling through her phone with one hand, stirring the remaining coffee with the other, completely unaware that I had just watched the death of our marriage from 4 different angles in high definition. And in that moment, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt something worse. Clarity. I realized she hadn't just made a mistake. She'd made choices. Repeatedly. Carefully. She had hidden in plain sight, counted on my silence, used my softness as her shield. She knew I wouldn't yell, wouldn't break things, wouldn't storm out. She knew I'd sit in this kitchen, eat my cereal, and pretend not to see what I'd seen. And for a long time, she was right. But something shifted in me as I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew. The woman who used to fall asleep with her hand on my chest and whisper that I made her feel safe. I stood up. She glanced up from her phone, blinking. You okay? I nodded. Actually, yeah, I think I am. Where are you going? Just out for a bit. Need to clear my head. She smiled, relieved. Good. You've been acting weird. Maybe some air will help. I didn't answer. I grabbed my keys and walked out. But I wasn't going for air. I was going to see someone who had messaged me earlier that morning from an unknown number. Someone who signed their message. If you're Selena's husband, we need to talk. You're not the only one. I met him at a cafe 6 blocks from our building. He was already there when I arrived, sitting near the window, hood pulled low, fingers tapping something invisible on the table. When I walked in, he stood awkwardly, like he wasn't sure whether to shake my hand or apologize. His name was Jonah. He wasn't her co-worker. He didn't work in advertising. He was a freelance photographer, weddings, mostly. Said he met Selena at a friend's engagement party 7 months ago. She told him she was in an unhappy marriage with a man who didn't pay attention to her anymore. Said I was cold, distant, borderline controlling, that she was trapped in a life that didn't feel like hers. He believed her, and they started whatever it was. He said it wasn't physical for a while, said she needed someone to talk to, that it only escalated recently, but that now, she wouldn't stop calling, wouldn't stop showing up unannounced. I think she lies to both of us, he said finally. I didn't know there was another guy, the one from the party. I only found out last night. Another guy, not just her boss, not just Jonah. There was a third. I should have felt destroyed in that moment, wrecked beyond repair. But I didn't. I felt something new instead, something clean, relief. Because now it wasn't about fixing anything. It wasn't about begging her to explain, or hoping she'd cry, or wanting her to say she was sorry. It was over. So far beyond over it felt like I'd stepped out of a burning house and realized I could breathe again. I thanked Jonah for telling me. He looked surprised. Said most people would have punched him. I told him he wasn't the one who broke the vows. He seemed smaller when I left, like he wasn't sure whether he'd just done the right thing or made it worse. But I didn't look back. I went home and found her on the couch, watching something on her laptop, barefoot, humming. She looked up and smiled like everything was still fixable, like I hadn't just spent the morning stitching together the final proof. "Erwin," she said. "Feeling better?" I nodded. Walked to the hallway closet. Took out the overnight bag. Packed only what mattered. Laptop, chargers, a few shirts, my passport. I wasn't running. I was choosing. She stood, suddenly panicked. "Wait, where are you going? What are you doing?" I zipped the bag slowly. "I think you already know." She crossed the room fast, put her hand on my arm. Can we talk?" I looked at her, really looked. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't afraid of her answer. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't afraid of starting over. "No," I said. "We've talked enough." She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't follow me to the door. She just stood there in her soft sweater and bare feet, blinking like I'd spoken a language she didn't understand. I stepped out into the hallway, and I let her watch me leave. I spent a few nights in a short-term rental across town. Then I got a call from a friend in Seattle. Said he had a guest room and a quiet gig editing training videos for a startup that didn't care how sad your voice sounded, as long as your cuts were clean. I took it. It's been 6 weeks now. I still walk with a limp in my trust. Still wake up sometimes expecting to find her next to me. But the air's different here. And so is the silence. The silence doesn't hurt anymore. It heals.